is that the Book of Enoch seems to indicate that there was extraterrestrial contact way back then. And so, of course, the current understanding of belief systems of many Christians is that we have the spirits that go to heaven and hell on this. But not just with the Book of Enoch, in which Enoch definitely had some experience in which his body literally went out into outer space. There's other documented instances within the Bible currently, and you got to read between the lines, okay? Even if you go to the book of Genesis, there is references to Enoch, okay? So we know that Enoch, the Bible acknowledges Enoch was a person, but they left it out, right? They tried to get rid of it. Look, the Book of Enoch, it's a really long thing to discuss, but first of all, people need to understand that when we have our current establishment of Christianity and the Bible and all these things, the Bible isn't just, this is the same Bible that's been around for thousands of years. This Bible has evolved. There's been edits, there's been alterations, there's been removals, deleting whole entire books of things within the Bible. And so the Book of Enoch is one of those particular, I don't know what you want to call it, scriptures, I guess, that has been removed, right? It is absolutely a real scripture. It exists in some of the most ancient scriptures around the world, including one of the longest or the oldest, I should say, scriptures, interpretations of the Bible dating back to ancient Ethiopia, and which most people wouldn't think, oh, Ethiopia has a huge population of Christianity or whatever you want to call it. But if you go to Ethiopia, the Book of Enoch is absolutely in the Ethiopian version of the Bible, and it is a big part of their religion. And over the years, the Book of Enoch has been removed, specifically dating back to what was it, King James in England. I think it was about 1600s, I believe. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to make a modern version of the Bible, so even more of these things were axed. And so the conversation here tonight is going to be focused on this Book of Enoch. What is in the Book of Enoch? Why are we even interested in it, right? Because there's some crazy shit in there. But there's a lot of other connections between the historical connections with the other biblical figures that can be controversial, but I believe there's something there. So that's my setup.
And Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, great. So that interesting. Ties it in because everyone knows Noah, the flood. They're kind of,
No, it's a very important thing to say, right? Because everyone knows Noah, like you said, but no one knows about Enoch. And Enoch was, like you say, the great-grandfather of Noah. Or is it great-grandfather or great-great? I can't remember.
Great-grandfather, just one.
Just one great. Okay.
And there were, but in the Book of Enoch, there were reports of 100 chapters.
Yeah, huge.
That is massive.
And you want to connect the Dead Sea Scrolls and all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff there.
The interesting thing I find that it's very common with people with religion, especially with like the big religions, the ones that are most notable in the world today. So you're looking at what's the top four, it'd be like Christianity, Judaism, Muslims, and Buddhism, and then Hinduism, right? Hindu. So I guess a big five, right? So you're looking at these main religions, and I think people very often neglect the fact that Christianity, Judaism, and this is going to piss people off, but the Muslim religion are all pretty much the same religion with
same shape,
the same foundation, and then they all branch off at the time of Christ, right? So they have all basically the same Old Testament, and so with the ancient Ethiopians. Now it's, I think they have a huge Jewish population there because there's a huge, that's like some of the originations of Judaism comes from Ethiopia, right? So like that's just super interesting. I didn't know that till recently reading that. And that, and like, so they were saying that like the King James version, I believe it had 40 something books.
No, it was in this. It was in a 60 something. I thought I have it in my notes here.
Oh, do you? Okay, so oh, it was the 60s. Okay, so and then
66 King James Catholic version. Shit, fucking dumbass.
Yeah, I got you.
Catholic version 73 and Ethiopian 81.
81. So yeah, so you're like, it's like a third more, right? So that's pretty interesting. And like one thing I learned as I researched this over the week was that I thought the Book of Enoch was like this like lost book that people kind of like believe maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't, and it was kind of, but it turns out it's actually, there's the book, the Bible in Ethiopia today, which is one of the oldest Bibles of all time.
Yep.
That they have, which is from the origination, the time of the origination, well before Christ, of the Old Testament, has the Book of Enoch in it. So it's not like this thing, just for like our audience who's listening, it's not like this thing, well, does it exist? Is this something that's just written modern times to like, be conspiracy theorists, whatever? It's literally an ancient text that exists there.
Yeah, I thought that too. I thought it was questionable whether or not it actually existed. If it was just
super interesting.
Oh, it absolutely exists. It still exists.
Yeah.
Right. And certain forms of Christianity still include that in their religious beliefs. And the fact that King James and these other forms of the Bible axe that shit out, well, why'd they axe it out? Well, we're going to talk about that because it's quite controversial. But I want to point out that Enoch, you go back even further, right? And the story goes is that going back to really, really old gospels, I think it's referred to as the Garima Gospels from Ethiopia, one of the oldest Christian texts that we know of, that during that time, King Solomon, in which a name some might be familiar with, King Solomon, you go back to many
early Judaism, Old Testament stuff.
Yeah. And so the story of Enoch is quite interesting because supposedly King Solomon, of course, was crucial in developing a lot of those ancient structures in Israel and a lot of history there. But the Queen of Sheba, a name that might ring a bell, she supposedly hooked up with King Solomon and had a child. And point out another thing, King Solomon is also, based on the scriptures and stuff, that he was the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem and also the keeper of the Ark of the Covenant. Okay. And so then he hooks up with the Queen of Sheba, who's from a different country, and they have a kid, right? And what happens? That kid grows up and says, I want to know my dad. And guess what? When he's older, the queen lets him go and visit his dad, the King Solomon. And they come back to Ethiopia with lots of Jewish influence and whatnot. So this is going back way back before all this shit, right? And you can't say it's not a thing because it's fucking written down everywhere. And then it's just a spiral event. We get into all these connections, right? Of that led to this, led to this, led to this. And yet people nowadays just go, man,
but
you're going to hell.
There are parts that are from the Book of Enoch that aren't public, correct? That aren't known.
I think that's speculative, but I would not doubt it.
I think, like, in my opinion on that was like the acknowledged version of the Bible, the accepted version by the church, has this information in. The Book of Enoch exists, in Ethiopia, and I mean probably get on Amazon now, but the original texts are in like Ethiopia, and that when King James Version came out and the Catholic Bible, when they came out were published, they just didn't include it, and because they believed it was dangerous. But also it's dangerous is kind of relative, right? Because it's dangerous, or is it dangerous to people, or is it just dangerous?
Belief control.
Yeah, exactly. The church itself, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because
But
depending on how you interpret it, there are passages that lead some to believe. There's talks of beings coming down
Oh,
to
yeah. We're
Earth,
gonna get into that.
yeah,
alien beliefs. Some UFOologists believe this could be the Book of Enoch could be the first reference to alien abductions.
it's really interesting, man. I was going. I'm sorry. Finish.
No. But and it's all up to interpretation, and I could see definitely how it was removed for political mass control.
Okay. So here's my thing with that is that absolutely that's the big deal here, right? Is that the Book of Enoch seems to indicate that there was extraterrestrial contact way back then. And so, of course, the current understanding of belief systems of many Christians is that we have the spirits that go to heaven and hell and all this. But not just with the Book of Enoch, in which Enoch definitely had some experience in which his body literally went out into outer space. There is other documented instances within the Bible currently, and you got to read between the lines. Okay. Even if you go to the book of Genesis, there is references to Enoch. Okay. So we know that Enoch, the Bible acknowledges Enoch was a person, but they left it out, right? They tried to get rid of it. And so
it doesn't fill the narrative they want, basically. It's like, yeah.
Right. Yeah. But so like when you have these descriptions literally written down and you read it, and the description is, it's not their spirit that's going to heavens. The book of like in the Book of Enoch, and there's other ones too, right? Other prophets or whatever you want to call them. They say, okay, we ascended in this chariot of fire. Okay. So what is a chariot of fire? First of all, if you were back then and you were describing flying objects in the sky with fire and lights and shit, how do you describe it, first of all, right? Okay, so chariot of fire might make sense. Then you go on to say, okay, Book of Enoch. He literally describes first person view. I'm in a fucking thing that has all these shiny crystals, that has blinking lights, and I can see the earth from up here. I can look down and see the earth. I'm not in heaven right now. I'm in the heavens. And then what happened with Enoch? He became everyone knew this, he was God's scribe, I should say, excuse me, for knowledge. He was supposed to have all the knowledge of everything. And so that happened. And in fact, with the other prophets, there's some instances, and there's like witnesses, like 100 people watching the body fly into outer space in the fires, chariots. Jesus is an example of a body being lifted into the heavens, right? The body's gone. So there's all these things like that people want to just go, oh yeah, I believe in God. You know,
it's like the belief in magic. It's interesting if you look in like the time, like the BC area. If you look like, King Solomon was like 900 BC, but like in 6th century BC, there's like Zoroastrianism. It's another like religion that's kind of died off, and
it's still around.
What, can you hear me?
That's still around though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, everything is, right. I mean, like paganism from Gaia,
yeah,
right, which is whatever. Everybody has their religion, but this kind of hazy area of religions where a lot of them kind of molded together and then created, over time created what are the modern day religions. You know what I mean? Like Zoroastrianism is believed by a lot of historians to be like the religion that basically was created then and formed into Christianity, Judaism, Muslim, like they all just came from this one religion. It's like, and it's because of geography and migration of people is how these different religions were formed, but all based off the same foundation, same general geographical area. But it's an interesting time. And we're looking at, like historically at this time, and then you have the Book of Enoch, and it's like, hey, well, like, from us, at least, the four of us were looking at this, like kind of logically looking at it. And you're like, okay, well, hooba joop. Hey, in the middle of all this hooba joop, this guy sounds like he got abducted by aliens, And that's what's so interesting about it. And dude, yeah, it's fascinating, like him explaining like seeing jewel, like the way that you would explain it at that era and their technology of seeing like the inside of a technologically advanced spacecraft, right? Like seeing jewels and seeing crystals and seeing blinking lights, and all this stuff is documented. They said this stuff, and to us it's clearly translated as like seeing buttons and seeing knobs and seeing things you would utilize in order to fly a craft, right? I mean, it's all super, I mean, like if they can carbon date this stuff back to the time, which they apparently can, like for him to be saying that stuff, it's pretty transparent that that's like what he was experiencing.
Well,
And
and let's go further though. It's not just in the Book of Enoch where this is explained, but in various places in the current version of the Bible is this concept of what they call the Watchers. The Watchers, in which are quote unquote angelic beings that watch over humanity and kind of dictate the direction in which civilization is going to go. And so this is all over the religious texts, right? And the Book of Enoch goes really into depth about it. And what I find really interesting is when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, right, which was a huge archaeological discovery that reshaped a lot of our understanding of the ancient scriptures, was that there is a particular scripture they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is based on Enoch, describing how the quote unquote watchers came down at one point, snatched up a bunch of women, made them their wives, and then created what they call the giants. Their offspring were giants. And the giants were a real thing that lived on Earth. And they were bad. They were like wanted to eat people and stuff like this. And you think of stories like David and Goliath, right? And so to me, it's like, where's this old ass ancient scriptures with all these old versions of the scriptures in the Dead Sea Scrolls, 1,000 years before, prior to they thought anything existed? And there's these stories with the Enoch, and there's that shit, which is actually consistent with the fact that that's kind of, I think, how we tend to think is that it's quite possible that aliens intervened with human creation at some point and did something. And that is consistent with that idea, right? I mean, it's there and it's hidden from the public. It's a thing.
it definitely explains like the whole concept of why they would think of it as dangerous, because the difference between an angel, for instance, quote unquote, being a physical entity versus a spiritual entity is humongous. And that's, I think, something that's like a huge differentiation for them at the time, even if they couldn't explain or understand what this other physical, otherworldly physical entity was, which we're saying is, probably extraterrestrial. But they don't want you thinking of it as physical. They want you to thinking of it as spiritual, because that's kind of what the foundation of control in which the church is trying to provide is based off of this kind of being that's all, it's a
Ominous.
specific setup, with God and the angels and this and that, versus like a physical being that is not like all seeing and all knowing like God. And that I don't think that the church, but even at that time, would want you to think of it as a physical, killable, humanoid.
But the
Anyway,
weird thing is, though, is that a lot of the ancient scriptures from other cultures from around the world, China, India, I mean, you name it, go around the whole world.
anywhere that has a pyramid.
anywhere that has written language, basically, is that it's the same shit. They're flying around in things in the air, taking off, humans going off into the space and all this shit. But for some reason, the Bible wants to try to like get not let that out. And so I do want to point out though that out of these watchers, Enoch claims that in his book there was about 200 of the watchers on Earth, and some of them Enoch even mentions by name in his chapters. One of them is by someone, I'm probably going to butcher the name, but Azazel.
Lucifer.
Azazel is later known exactly as Lucifer. So that's pretty fucking weird, dude.
Yeah.
That's weird. I mean,
doesn't it kind of piss you off a little bit that there's a lot of this information? Like I really believe that the powers that be, the Catholic Church, you know, all these powerful entities hide so much shit from us. I'm just wondering if there's ever, you know, I know I've said it before, but if there's ever going to be a day where they're just fine, you know what, finally, fuck it, here's all the information.
I will say that I will make a really cool clip for our channel in the near future of every time you said that, and I know that shit bothers me.
Like a compilation.
Yeah, because I know, it bothers me too. Because I just want to know. I'm just curious, man.
Because you know I believe that the Catholic Church has one of the largest private libraries on the planet.
Well, if there's ever
the Vatican, right?
We'll if there's ever zombie apocalypse, we'll scurry our way over there.
And
in the shadows, and we'll go read all that shit, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of shit, man.
Going up, yeah.
You know, it's partly government, but religion's relationship with government is just, that's one of the things that really, if I had somehow some power to like make a few choices to change the world, that would be the number one thing. Dismantle completely religion's role in government, because it shouldn't play any role.
But back then, when the Book of Enoch was chosen to be removed from the Bible, there was more of a heavy influence where religion was politics. It was the government. It was,
especially going back to like England and things like this, right? But because before that,
Palestine, Israel.
Yeah, I mean, did you see the shit where they actually have a fucking link that there's evidence that points to the fact that Enoch might have been the one that actually was in charge of constructing the Great Pyramid?
Yes.
That's fucking crazy. You know, there's all this shit, and the fact that Noah, right, was born, his great grandson, and supposedly that was like a predetermined thing. Like Noah's going to be the guy who is going to be like the person who helps get rid of this mess on Earth with all these people and start something new. And there's even evidence that Noah was like, when he was born, was like this luminous like figure where everyone's like, what the fuck, right? Kind of like stories of Jesus and stuff like that. But the lineage there, right, the bloodline, it seems to be too coincidental that there's these stories of people going into outer space in the ancient scriptures, and then you have the bloodline. They let Noah's story go, right? Because Noah doesn't have the stories, I think, of going into outer space. But then if you ask any Joe Schmo on Earth and go, hey, do you know who Noah's great grandfather was? No one's going to know that shit, right? And that whole story, and that's what this is all about, really, you know.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's a pretty crazy concept. Like, I don't know, like it's a funny way of looking at it is of all the insane stuff that you come across if you really like study the Bible. the Book of Enoch will be the one thing that like makes sense to me. Be like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy was abducted. Because a lot of the, it's not that it doesn't make sense, but a lot of it like it's just kind of like, okay, you know, like there's this fable and that fable. You know, you teach them to your kids, right? The boy who cried wolf. And you watch the Disney renditions of all these stories, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, you know, these different stories. And the Bible to me is very, very similar to that sort of stuff, right? But so you have all these fairy tales that are like parallel with a lot of the Bible stories. But then you get something like the Book of Enoch, and you're like, oh, you know, pump the brakes. Like, this is kind of interesting because this isn't a story specifically trying to teach a lesson. If anything, it's just identifying an experience and identifying a different species in our perspective, right? Of intelligent life. And it's what makes it so interesting because a lot of the Bible stuff's like, dude, like they're teaching. I don't know if I tell you, teaching we had to switch. My son had an extra year preschool because he had a summer cut off, and we ended up putting him in a Christian school. And I was like, it's a good thing, man. Like, he'll be fine. He'll learn some agape, you know, some New Testament stuff. This is all golden rule and right straight to Old Testament. And my son comes home like a week after he started, and he has his book, and he shows me his book, and he goes, it's about Moses, and he's like, Dad, why are they putting that baby on a in the river by itself? It's gonna drown. This is a 5-year-old, you know. And I'm just like,
teach him the story of Gabriel too.
He didn't get that far because we pulled him out. We found a better spot. But it's
you learned your lesson.
Yeah. I was just like, dude, like, why wouldn't you, like, you know, these kids, these sweet little minds, man. They're just kind little children, you know, like my son's all about, you know, empathy and helping his little sister and little brother out and yada yada. Why wouldn't you like take the philosophy of Jesus is it's beautiful, you know, it's nice stuff. It's like, take care of your friends, take care of your family, take care of the poor, you know, treat people how they should be, how you'd want to be treated. These concepts, why wouldn't they take these young minds, and if they're going to be teaching the Christian way, because that's,
like,
you know, what
teach
they're gonna,
ethics.
Yeah, exactly. Why on earth would you start with this crazy ass story of
Adam and Eve?
Yeah, and like, yeah, I mean, come on, dude. Like, that's the most ridiculous stuff. Anyways.
Well, but the Adam and Eve thing is actually kind of consistent with some of the stuff, right? Because I'm not gonna dismiss what you're saying.
Enoch, wasn't he the seventh? He was supposed to be the seventh descendant from Adam and Eve, I believe. I read somewhere.
Oh, I don't know that one, but that would make sense, especially with the King Solomon and Queen of Sheba thing. You know, but the whole Adam and Eve thing is like, you read it, and you know, I don't know. When you read the Bible, when most people read the Bible, what do people think that are like religious? Because I'm not going to read the Bible and be like, I worship the Bible. I'm going to look at that as, damn, this is a document that shows all kinds of things that happened, right? Things happened. It's almost like a historical document in some ways, right? And then you start thinking about all these things, Enoch and all this stuff. And you think about, oh, watchers, the people that supposedly watch over the earth and help us go in directions, or I don't know if you want to use the word help, but and then you think about the artificial insemination, you think about the intervention of the possibility of, you know, other beings coming into our existence and saying, man, let's fucking tweak this shit. What? Adam and Eve seems like a real thing in the sense that you think about Great Flood, you think about natural disasters, you think about wiping out populations. Maybe they created a situation in which humanity was born, kind of like going back to Pyramid of the Sun in some ways, right?
Yeah, I could buy on some level that there was that with a like extraterrestrial involvement, that there could have been such a thing, like a Prometheus, kind of like Prometheus, you know. That's a fantastic movie. Did you ever see that? It kind of that concept that like you know, these gods are really just aliens, and they came down, and maybe there was a natural disaster, and like, it's not, I mean, it's kind of thin, but it's possible that there was some sort of like, you know, leftover humans from this natural disaster, and those humans procreated with extraterrestrial. Interesting idea to me. but the Bible concepts are mostly ludicrous to me. I'm just gonna be straight up with that. Like
Well, this whole conversation just brings up the idea of the whole concept or theory of the panspermia,
Right.
where we were seeded by some other planet.
Asteroids or some
Yeah,
shit. Yeah.
it all kind of ties into it, I think.
yeah, and I think it'd be messed up. It'd be incorrect for anybody to completely discount that because we don't know. You know,
We
that's
don't
like
know.
that's
And
like
Yeah.
you can't build these. I'm sorry. I'm just at the point of my life where I cannot believe that ancient civilizations built giant structures like the Great Pyramid with fucking little tiny saws and shit. Something fucking happened. Either those goddamn things are so goddamn old, we don't even understand how old. Maybe hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, who knows? And then, you know, people just walking around being like, hey, we better pick some berries. And then, boom, shit just pops up all over the goddamn world. And then you have ancient scriptures like this that get deliberately removed from religious texts. And by the way, the King James Version of the Bible is till this day, it might be the most, or if not probably top 5 ever created books on planet Earth.
yeah, it's
distributed
like the top published book, yeah.
around planet Earth, right? Deliberately removing the ancient scriptures because they had some danger. And so, what's going on here? What's going on? I mean, seriously, people need to think about this shit like we're doing. Because if you want to walk around life and just be like, I live in this box, and if someone harms me, I will pray to my God. You gotta think a little more than that, right? We shouldn't live our lives like that, I feel like.
Also, there's still a bunch of rooms that they believe in the pyramids that they just haven't found yet.
Probably hella.
They didn't come with like a map at the entrance of like, you are here, and here's like a little trail map.
Starting point.
Every county park has, little X of like, you are here. Here's the bathrooms. The pyramids.
Do they even have bathrooms in the pyramid? Probably not.
Porta potties.
Yeah, the pyramids.
Men's room.
The pyramids are pretty much, I think, the most solid argument for extraterrestrial involvement, or at very least, multiple extinct species of humans over time that became advanced.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that you cannot argue about the pyramids, you just can't, is the fact that they exist all over the world because they're there, and that they exist in a time that we believe, conventionally, that there was no communication available over these places. And then like most of the arguments on how the rock, like most of the ways that people try to rationalize the way that granite and other rock was cut, is by these ancient like boulder cutting techniques. But what those don't do, super thin. What they don't show is how they did a lot of things. Like, for instance, creating symmetrical blocks is a huge one. So I can take a boulder, and there's this ancient method where you just take a ton of chisels and you chisel a bunch of nails and right, be on top of it, right, and it splits it, and you get a perfect clean edge. Great. Yeah. I have a boulder split in half. Fantastic. Now, how do you do that to make a block? So say, okay, you make one block, possible. Now
20-ton block.
Make 100 of these 20-ton blocks absolutely symmetrical. It's because the way the rock splits.
Now make 1,000,000.
Yeah, right. Now
and get it 200 feet in the air. Okay, you remember gravity is a thing that exists. Yeah. Sorry, flat earthers. Gravity is a thing that governs our life. To get the block to the very top, a lot more difficult than getting the block at the bottom, right? When it weighs 10 tons or whatever the fuck. Now, here's the weird thing that you're talking about that is that, okay, yeah, replicate it over and over again, right? In some ways, I can think, okay, maybe they had a method. They just got it down. They cut it every single time. It's perfect. Blah. But you're going to get them all up there, fucking way the fuck up there, super crazy heavy, break a crane will break, and there's stories even tied to the Book of Enoch where, like, Great Pyramid, everything was levitated there. Easter Island, everything was levitated. Shit just floated there. That's the stories. Ancient scriptures, ancient traditions all say the same shit. The shit floated there. So why they write that down? If that they just do you think they would just think that that could be a thing? Like, if I'm a caveman trying to hunt deer, would I just randomly think, yeah, probably what we can do is get this rock out of a mountain, cut it perfectly rectangular, and have it float over there? Why would you think that? You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's probably the thing about the pyramids, man. Is like you look at like all these pyramids around the world, and then you look at there's like you have these consistent stories of like, oh, it looked like a flint knife came down. Oh, there's this thing full of crystals. Oh, these lights. And then I think a lot of it gets written off because the people, modern day humans, are like, oh yeah, religious stories are crazy, whatever, walk on water,
Absolutely.
water to wine, whatever. This is all BS. But if you start kind of reading between the lines and you look at like there's these major consistencies, it starts to become it gets to the point where the most practical answer is that there was help from outside technology, whatever it is, like, because like we can't figure out how to do that now, and we have computers that could literally calculate the amount of weight and leverage that would be necessary to do it, and what size equipment would be able to be necessary to do it. We can calculate that, right? And so if we like take these calculations, computers are way smarter than us. Well, they're not, but can be programmed in order
AI.
to make these, maybe someday, make these difficult decisions and create these algorithms, and you still can't figure exactly how they did it. I always felt condescending assuming that these ancient civilizations can figure it out, but math is math. And when you get to the point where you can't figure it out with math, and you start going, okay, well, it's more advanced than us to a level to where it's not reasonable to imagine that these ancient civilizations could have done something that we can't do now, especially when it's mathematical. We're gonna say, Mr. Green, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, with all these, there's some eccentric people who are very, very, very wealthy that have talked about bringing back dinosaurs and all this other crap. Why can't we have an eccentric billionaire who's like, you know what, I'm going to try to replicate one of the pyramids and just see how long it takes us with today's tech and manpower and just see what we can do. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
The pyramids weren't they? They do have a timeline of when they believe they were built in, right?
Well, yeah, but that timeline is controversial because of carbon dating techniques, right? You can't carbon date stone. They have to go off of like, oh, we found this pottery nearby, or the mummy was here, or whatever. But it could very well be that those structures were there prior to the civilization existing at that site. And there's a lot of different things we could think about there, but you can't carbon date the stone. That's the whole thing. And maybe it was 5,000 years. Maybe it was 10,000 years. I don't know. But if it was that recent, nope. Those people that live there gathering berries and pigs and stuff to eat, I have no doubt in my mind that they didn't do it.
Yeah, as we talk about the Pyramid of the Sun, like they keep with the dating thing, they keep pushing it back because they'll be like, we're carbon dated to this time, but then they like look at I think it was a Pyramid of the Moon, and it was like built with different rocks in different times, difference, and then like they're looking at that and go, okay, well, we know this stone was way before this stone, and or because of stuff in the surrounding area that scientists analyzed and dated. And then it keeps getting pushed back because then it wasn't originally like, oh, it's like 600 AD, and now they're like, oh, well, maybe as far back as 100 AD, but they're not sure. And we discussed this Pyramid of the Sun, but it makes perfect sense in that manner to be like, there's these pyramids there, and then this people come upon it these indigenous people, the area, come upon this pyramid, and then they occupy it. And this is so long ago that from a scientist perspective is like they're gonna like date everything by when that civilization got there, which could easily be incorrect, and like they could have been around for much, much, much longer before that. It was occupied by these people at that time.
Well,
Is
how
there
about
is,
go ahead.
is there a limit of how old, like the max age that the pyramids could be? Because if like our species as we know it today, aren't we around 200,000
Just
years?
ask yourself this question, bro. How old are rocks on Earth?
Well, it depends on how much like exposure to weather, right? So if you look at a piece of
Right.
granite,
Rocks
that'd be the real
have
question. Is like whatever stone they used and the weather patterns there, how long would it take the weather patterns, a million years, 100,000 years,
Right.
1,000 years for the weather to degrade that stone, right? Because I mean, some of these pyramids are fucking pretty goddamn intact, dude. Yeah.
absolutely. And so like, look, there's giant rocks all over the fucking planet, right? And then you go and talk about the geology. You talk to the geologists, they're like, hey, look, these rocks over here in this mountain are 2 billion years old, right? Now, if I took that rock and I subjected it to all this weather, that rock is still the rock. I mean, what evidence is there that be like, I saw that in 1720 BC there was a weather storm or something, right? No, you're gonna put the rocks out there. I know what you're saying, right? There's gonna be some type of erosion, but the rocks are different. It's not like dirt. It's not like fucking sand or whatever the hell. It's they're rocks. And so we have the
Well, look
fact
at the
that
Grand Canyon, right?
the Grand Canyon, well, that's a lot of
Grand
dirt.
Canyon, so Grand Canyon was a river that was on flat ground, and over a period of time, and I haven't looked up the specifics of the Grand Canyon in a while, but over a period of time became the Grand Canyon. It was just the erosion of the river going through, right? And it just there's a time, and it also
But
highly
that's
depends
different.
on the
There's a
rock.
river. You know what I'm saying? It's not
Sure,
like these
but
great pyramids, there's a river just running through the pyramid.
Sure, but I mean, there is a time. If it's 10 million years, there is a time that if you put a piece of granite out and it got rained on every day, in the rainforest, there is a time. Eventually, the rock would eventually be dirt or sand or whatever. It just
It would be millions of years.
yeah, it'd be a long time, especially with the super dense stone. Like going back to the Pyramid of the Sun, this like volcanic rock that's super dense. Like that's thousands and thousands, if not millions of years. But I mean, there is a time period, and that I think that's kind of what like I think Mr. Green's alluding to
Yeah.
is like what is like for like these stones being used in these pyramids, what's the like there's got to be, if you were a geologist, they could say like at the oldest it could be this, right? There's got to
Because
be like
if
generally.
they could say at the oldest it could be, let's say, 1 million years old or 10 million years old, just to put out a number there. And if our species, as we know it today, Homo sapiens, I believe we're 200,000 years old or thereabouts, I might be off, then clearly it wasn't built by us.
Right. There's some discrepancy there. Soon,
My
but
timeline of our species age might be off.
how about this? Let's just take Great Pyramid, for example, which, as a reminder, it's quite possible that Enoch might have been the one that helped construct that thing. Let's just say you were chilling out there back then. You were chilling, we had a civilization, we had a nice life,
Drink some mead.
blah, blah. And then the supposed theory by archaeologists that's mainstream accepted is that the pyramid was built as a tomb. Well, let's think about that for a second. That fucking pyramid is so crazy, as is with most pyramids, but that one in particular. Think about how much time, energy, manpower it would take to do that, even now, right now. And we're gonna just build this shit. It's gonna take fucking decades and decades or whatever, 100 years. And by the time you build it, people are like, who's Tomb 4? I forgot who that guy is. All the people have died. I don't even remember, right? And so to me, it makes no sense. Why would you do that? I mean, you're fighting for survival out there. You're just trying to fucking get the nuts off the tree or hunt the boar that's out in the wild just to stay alive. And we're going to spend all our time and energy to do this crazy ass shit. And for what reason? It doesn't make sense to me, like logically.
I mean, I would not put it past humanity for insanity. I mean, whole
No,
generation lost
yeah.
World War One. You know, you like look at like the
Yeah,
China.
a little different getting a gun, right? Flying a plane.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue that building a plane and flying a plane is more easily accomplished than building that pyramid.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Wright brothers is just like, you know, building something to, you know, deal with like resist the, you know, wind resistance and physics, and they're basically it's a math equation essentially, right?
There's evidence in ancient Egypt that they had fucking planes.
Yep.
You ever heard of that shit?
Yep.
So I mean, go figure, right? Like, I don't know. It's too crazy. And we kind of got a little off topic with the Book of Enoch, but it's awesome conversation.